Hey guys, been a little while since I made a video. Had a lot take place in the past year. We moved. Obviously, if you look at some of my older videos and then you look at the backdrop here, we moved about 20 minutes away from my previous location. Huge upgrade all around in location and the home itself. Loving it. Um, I got injured. Some of you may or may not know I teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so I've ended up with two herniated discs in my neck, so I'm scheduling surgery for that. Maybe a little while before I'm back on the mats, so I figured, hey, with all this extra time on my hands, let's make a video about Linux, right? So, what I would like to talk about today, though, is, and this is going to be probably a multi-part series, but and I'm not sure what I'm going to call it yet, so kind of bear with me here. But I would like to say reasons Linux will never overtake Windows and Mac, because every year, I hear, oh, this is going to be the year of the Linux desktop, or Linux is coming up in market share, and it's like 8%, 9% of the market share now, and it's getting ready to overtake Windows just any day now. And they don't even talk about Mac. It's just like, it's just going to overtake Windows. But here's the thing, guys. I'm a Linux fan, like through and through. I really am. I love Linux. I'm currently this machine that I'm recording this on is a Linux machine. Uh, I'm dual booting Zorin OS and Manjaro KDE, and I love Linux. Several of my machines run Linux. I'm real big on installing it into older Macs. Or installing it onto like older MacBook Pros and stuff to get some more useful life out of them. These old Dell Optiplexes, these business class computers, they run great with Linux Mint and Zorin OS, and it's a fantastic experience on these older machines, and it breathes new life. Linux breathes new life into these older machines. But you know, the reason I'm making this video is because I see a lot of fans, a lot of Linux fans on YouTube, and they make comments, or I'll make a comment on a video, and then they'll come back with a counter argument or whatever. And here's the thing, guys. I love Linux, and I only want Linux to get better. That's my only goal. Linux is not going to get better by us as end users cutting it slack. Okay, I've been a Linux user since 2004, 2005. I believe I started out with Red Hat in college around 2004. Around 2005 or 6, I downloaded my first Ubuntu um, version 4 or 6, maybe. I don't remember, but it's old, around 2005 or 6. So I downloaded Ubuntu, been playing with Linux ever since. In 2008, I got my first Mac. So, and then after Windows 7, they kind of put a stop to Windows 7. Windows 7 was the last pinnacle of Windows software. That's the Windows operating system. To me, it ceased to exist around Windows 7. Everything after that was an abomination. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Windows 8, Windows 10, Windows 11. It's horrible. Would not wish it on anybody. And I haven't run a Windows machine since Windows 7. So that's where I stand on Windows. I can't stand it. I despise it. I ran a computer repair shop for 15 years, and you cannot pay me to own a Windows box. That being said, the only machines I own now are Mac, as you can clearly see behind me here with the iMac, Macs and Linux machines. That's the only operating systems I'll deal with anymore is Mac and Linux. Um, so I love Linux. I love to see the constant improvements. I love to see the little incremental changes and the incremental improvements, and every year it gets a little bit better and a little bit better, and a little bit better. So I don't misunderstand. When I come at this, I'm coming at this from a person who loves Linux, not from a hater, not from a PC fan, a Windows fanboy, not from a Mac fanboy standpoint, but from an honest Linux user perspective. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Anything I say critical about Linux is because I love it and I want it to get better, not because I'm hating on it. Okay, so one of the reasons why I think Linux will never overtake Windows or Mac? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one is financial backing. This one should be obvious, right? Uh, with Windows, you got a multi-million dollar corporation backing it. You know, as far as advertising goes, as far as vendors go, vendor lock-in, you can say they have a monopoly, whatever, but they have the backing of a multi-million dollar corporation. Same thing with Mac, with Mac OS. You have the backing of a multi-billion dollar corporation. And here's the thing, guys. Not only is it about advertising, that's one thing, but it's about software support. And I'll get into that later. But it's also about we cut Linux way too much slack. We're too nice about Linux. We're too easy on Linux. And the thing is, I understand it because the Linux developers, for the most part, unless you work for Ubuntu or Fedora or something like that, you're probably not getting paid. You're doing this on your own time. You're volunteering your time to, or maybe you get donations, whatever limited donations you get. Um, but you don't really get paid. There's not a lot of Linux developers sitting around getting a full-time paycheck and making a living off developing for Linux. So, therefore, people cut Linux a lot of slack. So when something doesn't work correctly, or it kind of sort of works if you can trick your computer into it with enough terminal hacks, people have a tendency just to let it go and be like, well, that's what you have to do with Linux. It's free and open source, so you can't complain. Well, bullshit, I can complain. It is absolutely something I can complain about. And if you want Linux to grow, if you want Linux to get better, if you want Linux to overtake Windows at some point, or become a Mac OS replacement, then you're going to have to call people out on it. See, that's one of the main differences. When I say financial backing of a major corporation, it's not just about the advertising dollars. Um, if I put someone to work for Apple, and Tim Cook comes in and he sees something obviously wrong with this operator. It would never make it that far, but I'm just using that as an example. Tim Cook comes in, he sees something obviously messed up about this operating system. Every 10th time you click on this application, it stops and restarts itself, or it shuts down, or it fails to do whatever it's supposed to do, right? Your job at Apple would be over at that point. Like, you would probably get one chance to correct what you've done, and your job there would be you'd be out of a job. They would not accept that. Nobody's going to pay you six figures a year to develop software that kind of sort of works some of the time when it feels like it, or an operating system that works like that. Nobody's going to pay you at Microsoft for you doing that either. I mean, you can say what you want about Windows, but the operating system tends to work most of the time, and you don't really have to hack it or trick it into working. I mean, it just kind of does what it does. Now, one of the reasons is it's so locked down, it's kind of hard to tinker with it or do anything that's going to mess it up. And that's one of the, quote, strengths of Linux, right? But we'll get into that at another point in time. That's for another video. But my point is, when a Linux operating system, when a Linux distro doesn't work properly, people make excuses for it. Well, at the end of the day, it's free, so what you going to do, right? Well, yeah, at the end of the day, it is free, but, have some pride in your work. You know what I mean? I'll give a few examples. MX Linux. MX Linux has some good ideas, some good tools that I think really should be baked into any Linux distro. So the tools aspect of it's great. But the UI looks like a pile of steaming dog shit. It's absolutely horrible. It looks like Windows 95/Windows 98. And yeah, there's some stuff you can do and theme it up and try to make it look better, and then it usually breaks the system, and it's just not even worth it. So, spend an extra 15 minutes and make the UI decent. Linux Mint does, Ubuntu does it, Zorin OS does it. Why can't MX do it? Because for whatever reason, the developer is just lazy and doesn't want to, or he thinks that looks good and yay, right? But he's like on that fringe percentage of whoever, you got one person literally developing the entire operating system, and whatever he likes, that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, go somewhere else, pretty much. And that's kind of how it is with a lot of Linux distros. They have such potential, but they're restricted by the people that work on them. And we cut them too much slack. We really do. I mean, it should not be. You shouldn't let it go. We wouldn't let it go with Mac, and and wouldn't let it go with Windows. So you certainly shouldn't let it go with Linux if you want it to grow and get better. Stop making excuses. Well, it's free, so therefore it's going to kind of suck. Well, really, really? I mean, you want it to get better. Answer some of these criticisms. So that leads me into the next aspect of it, which is the software. Let's talk about for a second this FOSS, this notion of FOSS, free and open source software, right? Okay, I understand the philosophy behind it. I do. I tend to be more pragmatic, and I just go for what works. Okay, so if it works for what I want to use it for, the tool that I want to use it for, that's what I go with, right? And I really don't care if it's open source. I don't care if it's free. I really don't care. If it's a good tool, it does the job, and doesn't look hideous, I'm probably going to have that software, right? Open source or not. Now, that being said, you know, if your stance is that, nope, not going to use it unless it's free and open source, well, then you got what you got, right? It is what it is. But what really bothers me is when these people get on here and try to say GIMP is just as good as Photoshop, or is just as good as Affinity Photo. Well, no, it's not. No, it's not. If it was, nobody would use Photoshop and they would just switch over to GIMP for the industry standard and save people millions of dollars. But it's not. LibreOffice is not a Microsoft Office replacement. Now, for a lot of people, it could be. I understand that. I'm not saying for everybody, but I'm talking about industry standard is not LibreOffice. It's Microsoft Office. Industry standard is Adobe Photoshop, not GIMP. And there's reasons behind it because it's the best software for the job. It just is, right? You can do 90% in GIMP what you can do in Photoshop, but it's not quite the same. And let's talk about how horrible it looks. Why? Why does it look that way? Why? There's no excuse for it. GIMP has always looked like a pile of dog shit. It always has. Ever since I've been using it, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years, I don't know, ever how long it's been out, I've been trying to use GIMP. And GIMP has always looked like a pile of crap. It always has. The UI is all over the place. It's not cohesive. It's not a good experience. It's just the UI is absolutely garbage. Why does it have to look like that? There's other applications out there, such as Inkscape. Let me pull up my browser here real quick. Yeah, I'm looking at Inkscape right now, and Inkscape has a pretty decent, pretty cohesive UI, and I don't see any reason why GIMP can't take a cue from them, spend 15 minutes extra on their software, and just make the UI usable. That would be great. But people cut them too much slack. People, oh well, it's open source, it's free, so I can't complain. Well, I can complain, and I'm not going to use the shit software. I'm not going to do it. Not when there's other better alternatives out there on other operating systems. I'll just boot into Mac OS and use Affinity Photo or Pixelmator Pro or Photoshop or any number of great applications that are all better than GIMP. And they look good, right? And why is it? Why do those applications all look better and perform better than GIMP? Why? Because people are getting paid to develop those applications and no one's getting paid to develop GIMP. That's why. And you cut them slack. You as in Linux users, you're like, it's good enough. It kind of sort of works, and I got to trick it into opening certain types of files, and the UI looks hideous. But you know what? It's free, and it still kind of works and does what I need it to do. Well, that's great if you never want to see it improve. If you never want to see the Linux distros improve, if you never want to see Linux software improve, if you never want to see free and open source do better, keep up with that attitude. But I think as end users, we owe it to ourselves and we owe it to these Linux distros to give them feedback and give them honest criticisms about what they could change to make Linux more popular and make these applications more usable, right? But since we're on software, let's keep on going with that for a second. I keep hearing people talk about, I hear all these recommendations. What do you use for video editing software, right? You're really limited in Linux. You are. There's about half a dozen applications in Linux that are video editors, right? Excuse me. Um, and pretty much they all suck. The only one that doesn't suck is Davinci Resolve, and you have to have one of a couple of different Linux distros where it'll actually work, or you have to hack it to no end to try to force it and trick it to work on non-supported systems. And that shouldn't be the way it is, right? Um, there's absolutely no reason why I shouldn't be able to go to the Blackmagic website, click on Davinci Resolve, hit download, double click a .deb file or a Flatpak file, and with 2 clicks it installed it on my system and it just worked. There's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't, period. There's no excuse for it. There is no excuse for it. There's not, right? I can get over here on this iMac, download iMovie for free. It works better than Kdenlive ever has. And it doesn't look like dog shit. And it's free. So if they can do it, if they can cobble together a video editing, if Apple can cobble together a video editing application, and make the UI look decent and make it perform the way it does, there's absolutely no reason why something like Kdenlive should even exist. It is garbage. It was garbage 5-6 years ago when I tried to use it, and it's still garbage. Every time Kdenlive comes out with a new version, I download it with my hopes up, thinking that it's not going to suck all of a sudden. And no, it still sucks. The UI is fucking hideous. It works some of the time. Sometimes it'll just error out and close down. And this is not just me. This is I know dozens of people out there who try to use it. There are whole boards that are just full of people complaining about Kdenlive and not being able to get it to work. Whole threads out there dedicated to it. Can't get it to work right. Whatever. With Davinci Resolve, same thing. There's no excuse for it. So the lack of professional grade software on the Linux platform is huge. It is a huge deal breaker for most people. And even the software that is pretty decent, the fact that no one will step in and spend an extra 5 minutes and give it a decent UI is a little ridiculous. It's just being lazy on their part because it's free. Again, they're just being lazy about developing it. That's the end of the story. And I've heard people say, well, why don't you learn programming and do it yourself? Well, that's not how this works, right? You want it to be popular. You want it to be a big thing. Get on these developers. That's what they do. That's what they went to school for, right? That's what they went to college for. They went to college for programming. They learned how to code all this stuff. Spend an extra few minutes and make it actually look decent and work correctly on all the Linux machines. I should be able to download Davinci Resolve as a .deb file or a Flatpak file and install it on any damn Linux distro I want to with 2 clicks. And if you can't do that, and if you ever have to open a terminal to install software, that's it. It's shit. It's dog shit right there. Just let it go. It's gone. It's over. You've lost that. Now, let's talk about games for a second here, right? Yeah, I know Steam exists. I know Lutris exists, and I know Proton exists. I know all these things exist, right? They do, but no hardcore gamer is out there using Linux. They're just not, okay? They're not using Linux, and there's a reason why. Because you're never going to get the performance on Linux on these games, going through 2 or 3 different layers of trickery to try to make the application work that it was never designed to work on a platform that was never designed to work on. You're never going to get the same performance as you will with something that's just natively installed on your machine that it was made to work on. You're not going to get the same level of performance. You're not. Number 2. Why do I need to install 3, 4, 5 different applications and then hack my game to get it to work on Linux? Why? Because it wasn't made for Linux. Simple reason. And just because you can hack it and get it to kind of sort of work doesn't mean the experience is going to be good, right? Until you can, you're never going to get gamers over on the side of Linux, and I'm talking about like real gamers, not real casual gamers like EB on here on YouTube. I'm talking about like real hardcore gamers. You're never going to get them over on this side until they can go to a store, a box store, buy their game or download their .whatever file, double click on it, and it just install on the machine and update and work. the whole anti-cheat thing, etc., etc. Until you can do that, until you can go to a box store and buy a game, buy Call of Duty, and it say will run on Linux on the bottom of it, and you double click it, and it actually install on Linux with one thing, one click, just install it, and it just work. Until you can do that, Linux is never going to be popular among the gamers. So now you've lost professionals because you don't have any good professional grade software for Linux. You know, you got GIMP and you got LibreOffice. You know, you don't have Microsoft Office, and you don't have Photoshop, and you don't have Affinity Photo, and you don't have this, and you don't have that. Well, now you've lost your professionals right there. Now you've lost your gamers, your people who are really into games. You've lost those people. Well, who do you have left? I mean, you have your uber nerds and your casuals, your grannies at home, you know, that's going to have a text document every once in a while, send and receive email, and, you know, stay in Google 95% of the time. You have those people, and like I said, your uber geeks who spend 95% of their time trying to trick their art systems into working properly. So, I mean, and that brings me to my last point, which is community. Oh, God, the Linux community, right? So I've been on the Linux Mint forums. I've been in the Ubuntu forums. I've been in the Elementary OS group. I've been in all these different forums for all these different distros, right? And a lot of them are okay. Linux Mint is okay. Ubuntu, some of those have been pretty decent. But then you have these quote communities like Arch, which just their whole thing is read the fucking manual, right? Read the fucking manual. Well, that's because Arch is not really meant to be an everyday operating system. It's not. It's not. It's not even meant to be. It's meant to be a toy. It's meant to be a plaything that you experiment with, so you can use the latest, greatest, bleeding edge software and play around with it, knowing full well that it's going to break every time some updates roll out, right? That's what it's meant to be. But yeah, they'll just say, read the fucking manual and send you on your way, and they're not being real helpful. And there's no consistent way of doing things. That's another thing. It's ridiculous, the level of hackery and BS sometimes when you go to these communities just to get simple things to work. You know, I'll give you an example. One of the better operating systems, one of the better Linux distros out there right now is Zorin OS. But when I first downloaded and installed Zorin OS, anytime I would have pictures or videos, there was no thumbnail preview. So I had to search some forums and find out why there was no thumbnail previews, and then I had to basically copy and paste a hack into a terminal and then restart my machine to get thumbnails to work. And this is on probably one of the top 3 best Linux distributions out there right now, and it didn't have thumbnail support. Just blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind that in 2024 there is an operating system out there that doesn't have thumbnail support without you having to hack it. And like I said, Zorin OS is probably one of the top 3 or 4 Linux distributions out there right now as far as the completeness and the user experience goes. And if it's still that janky, the other ones don't have any hope at all, any whatsoever, right? So as a community, if we're going to be a community about Linux, because you kind of got 2 different types of people in the quote Linux community. You have your uber geeks who really don't want to see other people using Linux at all. These are the people that say, I run Arch, by the way. They really don't want other people in the community. They want to think they're smarter than everybody else because they can trick their computer to work through the terminal, basically. So you got those people out there, and their whole thing is they like spending all their time fiddling with their operating system. And that are, you know, not really actually getting real work done or anything like that. It's like their whole thing is fiddling with their OS. Then you have the other types of people out there who, like I said, you know, they want Linux to be good. They want it to do better. But yet they cut the community, they cut the devs way too much slack because, you know, it's free and open source, so they don't complain. They just sit back and be meek about it and don't complain and voice these criticisms so people can make the operating system better. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts about, you know, the first 3 things that really come to my mind about why Linux will never overtake Windows and Mac. And you can, I don't care what side of the philosophical argument you're on. You can hate Apple as a company all you want to, but the simple fact is everything about macOS, other than the free and open source aspect, is better, demonstrably better than any Linux distro that's ever existed. And I've openly issued a challenge to people to show me, like, pick any Linux distro you want. We'll go down, fresh install of that Linux distro, fresh install of Mac OS 10, and we will see which operating system is better. And they won't do it because at the end of the day, they know that Mac OS is just better than any Linux distro out there. It's not even close. Is it as customizable as Linux? No. Is it free and open source? No. Is it better as an operating system in every regard than Linux? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And that's just how it is. And for someone to even try to argue against that is ridiculous. I had a guy in the comments the other day. I'm like, hey, make a video. Install a Linux distro and show me, like, why it's better than Mac OS. He wouldn't. He just left me a comment. Literally, I might have to post it on here. I might put it in the B-roll down here. But he posted a comment about this long that literally would have taken me 20 minutes to read this. And I'm just like, why? And I'll go to his, YouTube channel, and literally it's just a bunch of anime cartoons that he's ripped off from somewhere and, posted on his own channel or whatever. And it's just, come on, man. Like, I'm over here arguing with a 12-year-old about, why his Linux distro is not as good as Mac. Like, anyone with any common sense knows that. But you have people like that. You have these rabid fans out there that push Linux on everybody. And, somebody will bring their computer over, their Windows machine over because it has a virus. First thing they do is install fucking Arch Linux on wipe everything out and install Arch Linux on this granny's laptop. And then, every time something breaks, which it will absolutely, she's going to have problems. And is that really what you want running around spreading the virtues of Linux? Is people like that? Just a thought. Anyway, I know this video has gone long. I think I'm on close to 30 minutes now or whatever. So those are just my initial thoughts. But that challenge still stands. If anyone out there, any Linux fan out there, wants to post their chosen distro with no modifications whatsoever, it has to be just how it would be downloaded from the developer website. Show me your Linux distro. I will install it. I'll do a direct comparison to Mac OS, and we'll see which one is better. I mean, this is kind of stupid to even do that. I mean, it's like, it really is. It's kind of stupid to even go there, but people obviously don't believe what I say. They don't know anything about Mac OS other than what they've heard or they read on the forum. And, they use Linux because basically they're poor and can't afford a Mac. So that's their argument for it. But anyway, anyone out there who's open to that challenge, let me know. Post your little video link up or whatever, and we'll do this little challenge and go ahead and get it over with, because that's the biggest bunch of horse shit I've ever heard, is that there's a Linux distro out there that can even come close to competing with Mac OS. It cannot. It cannot. Period. End of story. Best Linux distros that ever existed out there are shit compared to Mac OS. And I love Linux. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I absolutely love Linux. I'm a Linux fan. I'm running Linux here. I'm running Linux on my laptop. I'm running Linux on the Mac Mini downstairs. Love it. Absolutely love it. But is it a Mac OS competitor? Absolutely not. It doesn't even fucking come close to Mac OS in any regard. So post your video up. If you want to leave a video response to this, feel free to. I would love that. Do not come at me in the comment section with a 4.5 hour long explanation, writing me a book in the comments, because I'm honestly, I'm just not going to read that shit. I don't have time for that. And usually it's just a 30-minute long rant about why someone doesn't like Apple. It has absolutely nothing to do with the operating system. Oh, the machines are too expensive. Apple did this. Apple said that. Tim Cook did that, and he said that. I don't want to hear any of that. Compare the operating systems. Compare Mac OS to Linux and do a video about it. And let's get this ball rolling. I'll talk to you guys later.